if you have not had a chance yet to read the 10 really dumb mistakes that very smart couples make, please avail yourself of a copy. I cannot tell you how much heartache, how much trouble, how much, it really is. It's very, when I was a chassan, they didn't have this kind of stuff. This is the book. When I was originally going to publish this with Art Scroll, and when I sent Zlotowitz the initial email, the header read, "This is the book I wish I had read when I was a chassan," and I meant it. I really meant it. So I really highly recommend, if you haven't gotten a chance to read it yet, please avail yourself. You go to theshmooze.com and get a copy of the 10 really dumb mistakes that very smart couples make. If you're not a reader and you're a student of the 21st century and you don't read, then get the video book. The video book does all the work for you. I took all the essence of the 10 really dumb mistakes book and I put it into video format, 3 4-minute videos, short, cute, animated. You could open it and it plays. If you can open it, it plays. It's got the, where am I? Here I am. It plays. It's, well, let me make it a little louder. Like yourself, your spouse, and relationships. And along the way, we're going to meet some very smart couples doing some very dumb things, and hopefully we'll learn how to avoid the 10 really dumb mistakes. They're very smart. So please avail yourself. Again, I highly recommend it. It will save you a lot of pain, a lot of, again, I don't know how else to say it. If you take the time and invest in your marriage, especially if you're not married yet, it comes back, you have a lifetime of happiness and joy. And if you make mistakes in the beginning, it becomes very, very difficult. It becomes more difficult to extract yourself. And okay, very good. One of the fellows writes that since last week, when I discussed the decibel level, he mentions before he discusses with his wife, he asks, is it too loud? Good, excellent. Isn't that amazing? Again, I didn't know that for 36 years. It's, you always learn new things, and as long as you're ready to learn and you're open-minded and do what you're supposed to, Mitzvah Hashem, you succeed. All right, so let us begin. So this is session 3. It's called Mind Blind, and I'll begin with a quick recap. And again, please, at any time, feel free. You can ask questions, typing them into the Q&A. Afterwards, I'd like to open the floor to anyone who's brave enough actually to raise your hand and ask questions live. We'll do that as well. But let's really begin. Okay, so first, a very quick recap. A successful marriage has 3 components. The 3 pillars to a successful marriage are commitment, love, and learning to live together. Now, as we discussed previously, love is the glue of marriage. Love is what keeps everything together. Love is what keeps you in the thick and thin of things, in the heavy traffic of life. If there isn't a solid bond of love, of connection between you guys, it's going to be very difficult. And gentlemen, I can't stress this enough. I can't say it enough times. This one is on you. It is a husband's role to romance his wife. This one's yours. It's all you. It's all about you. I read the Stipler's letter last time. I'm going to read it again because it bears repeating. The Stipler wrote in a letter, the main hope of woman in the world is to have a husband who loves her. When she sees that this isn't so, it crushes her spirit and can be close to pikuach nefesh. Gentlemen, this is the easiest one to solve. All you got to do is pay attention, but you actually have to do it. It's the mini vacations, it's the love notes, the gifts, the date nights, all the things that a couple in love need to be doing. You need to be having an ongoing love affair with your spouse. And gentlemen, this one's on you much more than the woman. Why? Because it's your role to romance your wife. And both parties have to work on stuff, but your wife needs to know that you cherish her. She needs to know that she's number one in your eyes. We mentioned there are tools that bond, quite a number of tools. We're going to discuss some of them this evening. There's attraction, infatuation, romantic love, physical intimacy, respect, appreciation, friendship. They all come together to form that ultimate love. But the one that I'm focused on the first session, and really is a very easy fix in most situations, is romantic love. And gentlemen, again, that's your job. It's your job to plan the dates. It's your job to plan the gifts, the notes, everything that your wife needs to know that you cherish her. And as Chazal tell us, it's a Rashi in Chumash, she has to make his wife happy. And when a woman sees that in word, deed, and actions, she is number one, that he cherishes her, he will be a very happy individual, because she is going to be filled, fulfilled, happy, and guess what? When she's happy, you're happy as well. She has to know quite clearly that he cherishes me. And we also discussed last week that one of the roles of a couple throughout their marriage is to remain best friends who love each other. And this one is very difficult, because in the thick and thin of life, when it's my needs versus her needs, there's only limited resources. Do we spend money here? Do we spend money there? Do we go there? Do we go here? Invariably, there are going to be differences, and remaining friends, but not just friends, re'im ahuvim, best friends who love each other, that is the key. Okay, that's a quick recap from the last 2 sessions. But let's start our material for this session. This session is called Mind Blind. And mind blind is something that we all suffer from. We're all blind to anyone else's mind. We're all locked into our own world. And I'd like to really focus on that this evening. So let's begin with a pasuk in Chumash. V'yomer Hashem Elokim lo tov v'yos adam levado e'esel lo eze kenegdo. After Hashem created Adam Rishon, put him in Gan Eden, in the perfect environment, the ultimate situation, Hashem says it is not good for him to be alone. E'esel lo ezer kenegdo. Now, ezer kenegdo is a very interesting expression. Ezer means help. Kenegdo means opposite. Rashi points out, Ezer kenegdo zacha, Ezer, if he zocha, if he merits, if he gets it right, she'll be an aid. Lo zacha, if he doesn't merit, kenegdo lilachem. And again, this is exactly what Rashi's saying. If he merits, she's a helpmate. If not, she's against him for war. And gentlemen, that is marriage. It is either Gan Eden or it is the opposite. But it's rarely in the middle. Rarely in the middle. She's either on your side, on your team, your best friends, you're working together, there's a beautiful bond of connection and love, or it is very, very hot and very, very ugly. And that's what Rashi says. If he's zoche, then she's an ezer. If not, it's kenegdo. And I'd like to ask what I consider the obvious question on this Rashi. I hear what Rashi's saying, but where in the world does he get it from? How does Rashi know? All the pasuk says is ezer kenegdo. Hashem says it's not good for man to be alone. E'esalo, I'm going to make for him an ezer kenegdo. How does Rashi know, he quotes the Gemara, how does the Gemara know that ezer kenegdo means if he's merits, she'll be an ezer, she'll be a support and aid. But if not, if he doesn't merit, she's going to be against him to war, to fight. How does Rashi know that? How does he know that ezer kenegdo means that? So the Gur Aryeh, the Maral, on this Rashi explains exactly where Rashi gets it from. Explains the word, the Gur Aryeh, that the word ezer kenegdo, kenegdo means opposite. But you see, kenegdo, opposite, has 2 very different meanings. Opposite can mean opposite as in facing. Vayichan Yisrael neged Har. The Har Sinai was over here, and the Klal Yisrael camped facing, opposite, facing the mountain is where they face. That's one meaning of opposite. On the same plane, on the same level. Kenegdo meaning opposite as in facing. However, explains the Gur Aryeh, kenegdo has another meaning as well. It can mean opposite as in antithesis, radically different, contrary, the exact opposite. And then the Gur Aryeh explains exactly where Rashi gets it from. You see, he explains almost every relationship that we're engaged in is hierarchical. There's a top and a bottom, people above, people below. So for instance, there is a boss and employees, a clear hierarchy. There's a teacher and student, again, a hierarchy. Father and son. In almost every relationship that we engage in, there's someone who's in charge, someone's the boss. So we talk, we discuss, but if things don't work out, listen, I'm in charge over here, it's going to be my way. There's a decision maker, there's someone in charge, there's someone who has the final say. That's every relationship that you engage in, almost everyone, but explains the morale that except for this one, Ke'isha chashuva v'shekula kamoa ish. The woman is equal and on the same level as the man, meaning husband and wives are equals. It's not that if you have this vision that I'm in charge around here, I'm the boss, then I got some bad news for you. It ain't going to happen. It's not going to work. It's not the world we live in, and it's not reality. The simple reality is something that the Maral is telling us. Ezer kenegdo, she is kenegdo, meaning she's on the same plane. Kenegdo means opposite, as in Vayichan Sham keneged Har, on the facing, but she's also opposite in the sense that she's contrary, the exact opposite. Equal and opposite, equal partners with different roles, equal partners with opposite tendencies, inclinations, desires, and outlook. And gentlemen, this really is the punchline. Men and women are different, but not like casually different, not like slightly different, not different topically. They are mamish, literally opposite, as in everything that you could ever envision or imagine, they're opposite. But just to make it clear, I want you to understand what the word opposite means. And let's play the opposite game. I'll say a word, and you tell me the opposite. So let's say I say black, you're going to say white. If I say in, you'll say out. If I say up, you'll say down. So let's play the opposite game. Male, female. But that's the point. Opposite. Different desires, interests, different inclinations, different temperament, different ways of viewing almost everything. Explains the morale, that's exactly where Rashi gets it from. You know why it's Ezer Kenegdo? Because if he's Zocha, it'll be beautiful. She's a helpmate. They're together, a bond of love, a connection. They're living the life of Eden, living a beautiful life. But if not, it's going to be very difficult. Why? Because she's your equal on the same plane. You can't boss her around. You can't say it's my way or the highway. You can't tell her what to do. And because she's the opposite nature of you, she's going to have a different desire, different interests, and you're going to be pulling and pulling and pulling, and she's going to be against you, lilachim, and that's exactly what Rashi's saying. If he merits, she is a helpmate, it'll be beautiful, but if not, then it's going to be her against him, and it's going to be war. And gentlemen, I don't want to, especially if you're a chassan, I don't want to sort of put a damper on things at all, but I do want you to understand from a very, very cold, calculated perspective that not a single marriage should succeed. If you were rational, if you were clear thinking, and analyze this thing called marriage, you would quickly realize that not a single marriage should ever succeed. Now, I'm going to show you this from an interesting chazal. Rabbi Tarfon. It's a Rabbi Tarfon, I believe. It goes back a little bit. I saw this only maybe this morning. Rabbi Tarfon was once learning with a noble woman. In those days, the Romans very much were enamored with Judaism. Remember, Catholicism didn't take over until the 4th century, and this was a time when the Chachamim were greatly respected. And oftentimes the Romans would come to the Chachamim to learn. And one time, Rabbi Tarfon had some various conversations with a certain noble woman, a Roman woman, and she asked him the following question: what is Hashem doing now? Rabbi Tarfon said, Hashem is mezavig zuvugim. Hashem is making matches. What? That's what Hashem does? I could do that. And says Rabbi Tarfon, I want you to know, if to you it's easy, to Hashem it's more difficult than Kriyas Yamsuf. She said, I don't know what you're saying. I could easily do it. And Medrash tells us she went home. She had 1,000 male slaves, 1,000 women slaves. She matched them up. You to you, you to you, you to you. She made zivugim. And the next day she comes back and she sees this one with a black eye, this one with a broken leg, this one limping. What happened? You woman you gave me, that man you gave me, the fighting and screaming. She comes running to Rabbi Tarfon, Tarascha emes, what you said is right. Says Rabbi Tarfon, didn't I tell you? To you think it's easy, to Hashem it's more difficult than Kriyas Yamsuf. And while there are many lessons to learn from this medrash, let me share with you one very important one. Men and women should not be successful in marriage. Why? Because they have such different interests, such different desires, and invariably there's going to be so many things that they argue about, that they view differently, that not a single marriage should succeed. How do I know this? I'll give you a simple piece of business advice. If you have a business, you know someone in business, hire talent. If you need marketing talent, you need salespeople, you need accounting help, bring in whatever talent you need, but whatever you do, don't bring in a partner. Why? Because almost every business partnership ends, and it ends usually very badly. You see, it might be 5 years, it might be 10 years, but eventually there's a varying of positions. I want to take the company overseas, You feel the domestic market is stronger. You feel this is the way, I feel this is the way. And almost every business partnership, give it 5 years, give it 10 years, ends up in a tug of war, ends up in a very, very difficult situation. The only thing worse than a typical business partnership is bringing a family member, because then when the partnership ends, it's pretty ugly. So here's the point. You take two people of the same gender, give them a mission, ask them to spend their 9 to 5 together, and invariably it'll last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And when you ask a young man and a young woman to get married, you're not asking them to share their 9 to 5, and you're not asking them to do it for 5 years or 10 years. You're asking them to live their lives together from now on for the next 50, 60 years. But that means everything. Everything they do, they will do together. From the time they get up in the morning till the time they go to sleep at night, how they keep the house, what type of vacations they go or they don't go on, how they bring up the children. Every issue, they're now going to be intertwined and interwoven. And people by nature are so different. Look around any group of people you know, and you'll see vast differences. Some people are introverted, some people are extroverted, some people are very shy, some people are morning people, some people are night people, some people like to perform, some people are risk averse, some people are risk takers. There are vast differences amongst any two human beings. And when you ask any two human beings to share such close proximity, it really shouldn't work. But gentlemen, you will make a discovery at some point in your marriage that is that your wife is different than you. And you're going to say something like, oh my goodness, she's so different. I'm such a morning person, she's such a night person. I'm so high energy, she's so low energy. I'm so organized, she's so spontaneous. We're just not a match. Any difference that you will find, I guarantee, pales in comparison to the single greatest difference between you and your spouse, and that is that you are a man and she is a woman. And men and women are so different in their interests, in their desires, what they talk about, what they like to do, what they like to do, how they feel about things. If you think about it, not a single marriage should work. However, Hashem wants marriages to succeed. And therefore Hashem created many tools to allow that to happen. And some of those tools are what we mentioned earlier, the tools that bond. And these tools create that connection, create that bond, create that love between them. The glue of a successful marriage is the love, because there's so many differences, so much pulling you apart. If there isn't a powerful bond of love between you guys, it's going to be very difficult, and you have to use all the tools that bond. In the book I go through a little bit more in detail each of the tools, but let's discuss one this evening. And one tool that bonds, usually a chassid and kala have pretty much in abundance, is something called infatuation. Now, infatuation is a very interesting state. He looks in her eyes, she looks in her eyes, and whoo, the chemicals go off, and they are in la-la land. They're both giddy, they're both high, spending hours and hours and hours talking on the phone. And I know, because when I was single, maybe I shouldn't mention this here, long distance used to be mighty pricey. We racked up $1,000 bill when we were engaged. What am I going to tell you? That's the state of infatuation. But it's very interesting to note that the state of infatuation has a real change on the brain chemistry. The neurotransmitters, the serotonin, the dopamine, the adrenaline, the various neurotransmitters in the brain become affected. Scientists study this, and they show that a couple, while infatuated, the impact on the neurotransmitters is similar to cocaine use. The couple are high, and they each have the sense of, she's perfect, he's perfect, the violins are playing, and forever and ever we're going to live in happiness and bliss. And then maybe 6 weeks, maybe 6 months, maybe a year after the wedding, either he or she, sometimes both, wake up and say these words, oh my goodness, oh my gosh, I don't believe it. I made the biggest mistake in my life. I married the wrong one. And it's true that they made a mistake, but not that they married the wrong one. They mistook infatuation for love. This is one of the 10 really dumb mistakes that very smart couples make, mistaking infatuation for love. Infatuation is that sense of wow, that sense of unbelievable, that sense of it's incredible. and the couple are high. The problem is that it's a limited shelf life. You see, infatuation is a little bit like the sulfur on a kitchen match. You strike the match and it flares up, but that sulfur lasts for a very short time. Then the wood has to catch. If it doesn't catch, the sulfur just burns out. If the wood doesn't catch, it's going to be worthless. Infatuation has a shelf life. It lasts 6 months, it lasts a year, and then the couple has to do the very real job of building a bond of love. You see, if you mistake infatuation for love, you're making a fundamental error. Infatuation is instant. It just happens. It doesn't take work. You look in her eyes, she looks in yours, and wow, I never felt this way before in my life. But even more than that, infatuation has a power to blind you. You don't see her flaws, and if you do see the flaws, it's okay, I can live with it. But the third element of infatuation that's the most dangerous is that infatuation has a shelf life. 6 months, maybe a year, and then it's gone. And if you don't begin working on the bond of love, the real connection, and that doesn't take over at an early stage in your marriage, you're going to find yourself in a very difficult place. But the real bond of love is not instant. It takes a lot of work. The real bond of love doesn't just happen on its own. It takes devotion, it takes dedication. The commitment comes from knowing that Hashem brought you to the right one, but the work means on the love part, the romantic piece for you gentlemen, that it's everything that's required in the tools that bond, using all of them. But the key difference between infatuation and love is infatuation blinds you to her flaws. When you create a real bond of love, I fully am aware of my flaws of my spouse, but I love her anyway. I want her, she's my spouse. Despite my being fully aware of the flaws, I want her, I love her, I'm dedicated to her. And gentlemen, love is the glue to marriage, and one of the biggest mistakes that very young couples often make is they have this sense of it's going to be grand and glorious forever. We're not going to have to work at anything. We're never going to fight. We're never going to quibble. And they mistake infatuation for love. And I have a line that I'd like to share with you that I think is very, very eye-opening. The marriage begins when the infatuation ends. You see, when you're on cruise control and it's easy, the marriage has not begun yet. It'll buy you a couple of weeks, couple of months, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, but it's your job to do the real work. The real work is building that bond, building that love, the dedication, the devotion, being real friends, learning your spouse, learning what she needs, learning what's really important to her, and using all of the tools that bond. Okay, now, to be honest with you, this really shouldn't be a big deal. Why? Because Hashem gave us many tools, and most of them are pretty easy to use, and you keep your head on straight, you read the 10 really dumb mistakes, you know what a marriage needs, and you do what you're supposed to. You know there are 3 pillars that bond, and everything would be easy. And marriage wouldn't be so hard, except for one little problem. Gentlemen, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but yes, you, and I mean you, I'm included in the you, but you suffer from a fatal flaw. And I mean a fatal flaw. And I want to say this as clearly as I can, and I want to be as candid as I can. You suffer from a fatal flaw. That flaw is that you are human. You, I, and every other occupant of the planet have this fatal flaw. When I say fatal, it is fatal, but it's a flaw that blinds us, stops us, makes us dumb, stupid, and beyond description. Gentlemen, I am married now, Baruch Hashem, 36 years. I love my wife, we have a great marriage. But I can tell you on a regular basis, to this day, I still make utterly stupid, dumb mistakes. But why? I tell other people how to do it. I write books. I've dealt with hundreds of couples. Because when it's in my life, suddenly, oh my goodness, you ever notice you, I, and everyone else on the planet can be brilliant when analyzing someone else's situation. I could be so cool, calm, and calculated and recognize exactly where the error is. But when it's me, forget about it. And this flaw called being human is something that plagues us. Will plague us as long as we're on the planet. Hopefully we got a few years for it to plague us. but it is something that is absolutely a issue that makes it very, very difficult for you to be successfully married. And I want to spend some time on why this human flaw is so blinding and why it makes it so difficult to be successfully married. And to do that, let me share with you a little different era of history. Let's go back to the Dor HaFlaga. Right? There's a Tower of Babel. Tower of Babel with the nations of the world. It's got a small group of people, but they decided, Pasuk says, V'yikol aretz safa achas udvarim achadim. The entire world spoke one language. Remember, when Hashem created Adam Rishon and put him in Gan Eden, Adam Rishon awoke fully conversant, speaking Hebrew. And every human being from Adam and Chava only spoke one language. Everyone spoke Lashon HaKodesh. That was the only language that existed. And this group of people spoke the one language. Udvarim achadim, they were bound together. They were bound together on a mission, and this was the mission. Hava nivna lanu ir, let us build a city, umigdal, and a citadel, a castle, v'rosho b'shamayim, and let it be up in heaven. And the Rishonim explained to us exactly what their goal was. They were waging a war with God. God is too powerful. God is too in charge. They were trying to put a root to Tumah, trying to build this Migdal. The holiest city in existence is Yerushalayim. In the center of Yerushalayim is the base of Bechira, Har HaBayis. They recognized that. They were trying to build Tumah opposite Kedusha. They were trying to build a city of Tumah, build a tower of Tumah. They're waging war with God. Now, whether you understand that, whether I understand that or not, is irrelevant. They were quite a formidable enemy. But you know why they were formidable? Because Rashi said they had a superpower. They had a superpower that made them almost invincible. Explains Rashi, Hayunogin Ava Vareos Beinehem. Amongst each other there was a bond of friendship and love. As the pasuk says, Safa achas udvarim achadim, one mission, one language. As the Surah explains, normally what this breaks people up, if you have different goals, or you can't communicate. I want to do this, you want to do that. Or even if we want to do the same thing, but I can't explain it to you. There was one language, perfect communication. Everyone spoke the same language. They all knew what each other meant, and they all had one common goal: rebel against the creator of the heavens and earth. And because of that, they were knowing Ava Vareos. They had a tremendous bond of affection, of love. And because of that, they created quite a formidable opposition. Hashem says, Am echad v'safa achas l'kulam, one nation, one language. What they began doing, lo yibatzem, nothing is going to stop them. Says Hashem, there's nothing that's going to prevent them from accomplishing their goal, because they're unified, one unit, Ava Vareos. What does Hashem say? He says to Melachim Havarnerda, let's go down, V'navla Sham Sasam, let's mix up their language. Asher lo yishmu ish svas re'eu, each man will not know what the other says. And from that moment, when Hashem said that, instantly, instead of everyone speaking one language, 70 languages came onto the planet. If you want to know where French, German, Latin, I guess whatever the root languages were, where it came from, it was at that moment, up until the Dor HaFlaga, up until the Tower of Babel, every human being spoke Hebrew. In one instant, it all changed, and suddenly a man who spoke Hebrew his whole life began speaking Latin or Chinese or Japanese, whatever the language was, and suddenly the plans were aborted. Hashem spread them out because of that on the face of Kol Haaretz, and it stopped them from building the city. Hashem's plan succeeded by mixing up their language. Hashem spread them out, and they no longer could accomplish what they wanted because they were now spread out across the land. But you might wonder, how exactly did that happen? It's not like Hashem sent a hurricane and sent them across the world and now all in different parts of the world. The minute the language changed, suddenly they spread out. What happened? So Rashi explains to us what happened. They're working on this big tower. So this one asked, give me a brick. And because he said it in French or German, whatever language that the other person didn't understand, instead of a brick, he gave him mortar. What happened is, the guy who got the mortar instead of a brick took the mortar and smashed the other guy over the head. They started fighting, yelling, screaming back and forth. They could not live together. They could not occupy the same city. The group that had been practicing Ava Vareus, love and tremendous friendship, one unified mission. The minute the languages were changed, no longer were they unified. I asked for a brick and you give me mortar. I smash them over the head. They began fighting, kicking, screaming. They could not occupy the same city. They had to spread out, and the plans were aborted. Okay, so I want to ask the simple question. Here we have the scene. I asked for a brick, you give me mortar. And suddenly the language changed. And instead of I say something you don't understand, then he doesn't understand, and all of a sudden we're fighting and screaming. I have a very simple question. Why? What's the big deal? Look, suddenly life changed. We all used to speak Hebrew. Now suddenly I speak German, you speak French, and we can't communicate. We could do sign language. We could do... There are ways... Ava Vareus, they had one mission, a unified group of people who had one mission to fight, rebel against God. Couldn't they figure out a way to live together? The minute that the language changed, all of a sudden they're fighting, they're kicking, they're screaming. I asked for a brick, instead of brick you give me mortar, smash, kick. What happened? Why is that? And I believe if we take a little dive into human nature, we'll understand exactly what this Rashi is telling us. And to do that, let me share with you an interesting observation. Elizabeth Newton earned a PhD from Stanford University in psychology with a very ingenious experiment. She created two groups of people. One she called the tappers, and the other she called the listeners. The tappers' job it was to tap out a tune, to tap out a song, and the listener's job was to guess the song. Now she made a list of many common songs, Happy Birthday, Star Spangled Banner, and she gave the tappers a list of the songs, and the tapper was given the job to tap out the beat of the song, and the listener was given the job of guessing the song. And it's very interesting because she not only recorded it, she videotaped it, and you could see the expressions of the tappers. The tapper are tapping out the song, and the listener doesn't get it, and the tapper's like, what's the problem? And here's the interesting part. Throughout hundreds and hundreds of trials, with different people from every imaginable walk in life, she found only 2.5% of the time did the listener ever guess it right. And if you think about it, it shouldn't be too hard to realize why it's difficult. Because if I tap out a tune, it's hard to tell if that's Happy Birthday to Star Spangled Banner because the beat alone doesn't tell you what the tune is. But that was not the interesting part. The interesting part is she asked the tappers to guess the odds of the listener correctly identifying the song. Person after person, before tapping, during tapping, and after tapping, said at least 50-50. At least 50-50 they're going to guess. And invariably, the listeners never got it. And you can watch the tappers with these incredulous looks on their face. How could you not get it? It's so obvious. But would you like to know what she earned the PhD for? It's because of her thesis. You see, her thesis was that when I tap out the song, I can't help but play it in my mind. And when I play that song in my mind, it's so obvious, it's so clear, how could you not get it? And this simple understanding that what I know in my mind, you may not know. What I understand in my mental framework, you may not understand, is something that eludes all of us. And things that are so obvious to us, how could you not know it? And there's actually a term for this, and it's called mind blind. And mind blind means that I view the world in one way, and I assume everyone views the world the same way. I think one way, I assume everyone thinks that way. I feel this way, and I assume everyone feels the same way, where my experience defines reality. And again, it's an entire concept in psychology, theory of mind, beginning to understand that someone else might have a different viewpoint, might view things differently. And more than anything, just because I know something doesn't mean they know it. Just because I understand something doesn't mean they understand it. And if you understand what communication is, you understand communication is a very difficult job. Because communication means I take a concept, I encode it in words, I transmit it, you then hear the words, you decode it, but there's a lot of understanding. And the encoding is based on background and assumptions, temperament, understanding. And then when you decode it, it has to be decoded, again, according to background, assumptions, temperament, understandings. And communication is a very difficult process because there are many assumptions in my mind that may not be in your mind. Many things that I, of course, assume you know, but you don't have a clue about. And the result is, and that's the result. The result is that fights happen. And this concept, my experience defines reality, is the answer to the Dar Flugga. You see, you know what Rashi is telling us? Rashi is telling us these people grew up with one language. Their entire life, everyone they ever met, anyone they ever spoke to, anyone they ever had any connection to, spoke the same language. So I know that you know what I mean. And when you grow up with flawless communication, I know that I can communicate. And I know that you understand what I mean. Suddenly Hashem changes the language, and I ask for a brick. And what do you give me? You give me mortar. What do you give me mortar for? I asked for a brick. And don't tell me you didn't know what it means. Of course you know what a brick means. Well, I've said it my whole life. Everyone knows what it means. Everyone knows. How could you did it for me? Before you know it, the fighting, the screaming. Why? Because there was no capacity to understand that which I understand, you don't understand. And that which I know, you don't know. And as a result, it was impossible for them to live together because within a short amount of time, I know clearly you're doing it to bother me. You're doing it to annoy me. You're doing it because you're a nasty creep. And before you know it, they had to spread out across. They could not live together. And again, gentlemen, this concept, if I know it, of course you know it. And the result was what it was. Okay, now, this is a nice lesson for how to deal with people in general. And it's a very, very important lesson for any relationship that you'll have. If you're going to be a boss, if you're going to be an employee, you're going to be in any sort of environment, you're going to be a teacher, you're going to be whatever you'll be, this is an important lesson to learn that the single cause of every machlokes is misunderstanding. It's assumptions, presumptions. Of course you knew that. Of course you understood this. And of course the person didn't know that and didn't understand that. And the core root of any single machlokes is not understanding what I don't understand about you, and you're not understanding me not understanding the other person. And the single biggest cause of it is because my experience defines reality. And once I experience something, that is reality. And of course, everyone shares the same reality. Everyone, of course, feels the same way. Everyone looks at things the same way. And therefore, fights come about, machlokas come about. Okay, now, that's in every relationship that you'll deal with. But I'd like to share with you two real-life situations when it comes to marriage. And these are Maisa Shahaya. One is a very small example, but the other one is a very big deal example. Let me give you a very real and personal example. Baruch Hashem, we have married now quite a number of years, as I mentioned. And for many, many years now, Shabbos morning, I get up very early, the house is quiet. Since the kids are little, I would get up early, the house is quiet, I learn it's a machaya. And later on in the morning, I'll bring my wife a cup of coffee. Okay, I'll bring her a cup of coffee, and to this day, there's a reaction that I have when I get to the refrigerator door. I want to make my wife a delicious cup of coffee, so I reach for the creamer. And the problem is I have to stop, because my wife doesn't like her coffee with creamer. She likes it with skim milk. Now everyone knows that skim milk doesn't even change the color. You can't drink coffee with skim milk. And I want to give a good cup of coffee, and at least 4% milk, at least full. The problem is she doesn't like her coffee with anything but skim milk. And gentlemen, do you understand what I'm saying to you? The reason why I want to give her the coffee with creamer is because it tastes better, because it's more rich, it's more please let me do it for you. But the problem is she doesn't like it that way. And to this day, we're talking 35 years, 36 years now into it, it still takes me back, because of course everyone knows that coffee tastes so much better with full fat milk at least. But my wife doesn't like it that way. And that single understanding that my experience is my experience, but my experience doesn't define reality, is the biggest obstacle that you're going to have in living together. You see, commitment is something you work on. You know that Hashem doesn't make mistakes. You know that Hashem got it right. You know that Hashem chose for you the perfect match for you. It's going to be some work, but she's the perfect one. And even the love piece isn't that hard. You keep your nose to the grindstone. You do what you're supposed to do. The love notes, the gifts, the going out, the mini vacations. You be a romantic husband, and those two are pretty easy. The living together part is where most couples get into a lot of trouble. And the reason why living together is so difficult is because I understand what's normal. I understand what bothers people and what doesn't bother people. And for the life of me, I don't know what's with that woman. What's her problem? What's with her? Why can't she just be normal, as in like me? And we all do this where my experience defines reality. And the way I experience things is not just the right way, not just the best way, it's the only way. And of course, everyone feels just like me. And as long as you remain locked into that world, it will be very, very difficult for you to be happily married. Because as long as you remain in the world where my experience defines reality, you'll never understand your spouse, never understand what bothers her, never understand what she really needs, and never understand what she wants, and you're going to get into invariably the amount of fights and misunderstandings will be incredible. Why? Because you're not even attuned to what's going on. But that's a little example. Let me give you a much bigger life example, and this pretty much happened. A little change. To protect the guilty, I'm changing some of the details, but this is about what happens. A young man's married very nicely for 6 months now, and he comes home from Kollel. It's about 6:30. He's about to put his key into the apartment door, and he says to himself, Baruch Hashem, I married such a grounded, normal girl, not one of these flighty dames. She's so intelligent and normal. Chazdei Hashem. He opens the apartment door, walks in, and sees his wife up on the chair. What's the matter? What's the matter? What is it? What? A cockroach. What? Cockroach. What? He walks over to the bug, steps on it, says, you can come down now. And he doesn't say anything to her, but in his mind, grounded, not flighty. All right, fine. Not a big deal. Anyway, 2 weeks later, he's back in the base medrash, he's learning, and he doesn't even take a cell phone with him. He's a masmid, and a friend of his brings over a phone, and the friend says, it sounds very important. Your wife's on the phone. What is it? David, what is it? What? Could you come home, please? What's the matter? There are two of them. Come home, please, now. What? She wants me to leave base medrash, stop learning, to kill 2 stupid bugs. The steam starts coming out of his ears. He gets up and gets into his car, drives home, enters the apartment. There she is, up on the chair. Where are they? Over there. I hope you're satisfied. He turns around, heads right back to yeshiva, right back to learning. Okay, so here's the question. The question is, who was right? Who was right? Right? Who was right? Meaning, on the one hand, was she right? After all, listen, she's afraid of bugs. She's afraid of bugs, and she's calls her husband. She's finally married. She doesn't have to worry about these annoying things. She just calls her husband home to help her. Is she right? On the other hand, is he right? Listen, come on. Stop learning to kill 2 stupid bugs. Who is right? So the answer to that question is, who is right is the wrong question. Who was right is a good question to ask in a court of law, maybe a divorce court, but who was right is a terrible question to ask in a marriage. A far better question, far more profitable question to ask would be, what was going on? So I'd like to share with you what was going on. Baruch Hashem, I have 4 daughters and 2 sons. I don't know why it is, but in my house, the girls are always afraid of the bugs, the boys aren't. And when the girls were little, if they had a bug problem in their room, they'd call their baby brother. They'd have to make sure he didn't eat the bug. But for some reason, the girls were afraid of bugs, boys weren't. I don't know why. But here's the reality. For whatever which reason, she is afraid of those bugs. His mistake was judging her based on his experience. In his world, the world he occupies, bugs aren't scary, bugs are not a big deal. And the mistake that he made was he judged her based on his experience. If he wanted to be a little bit more fair, let's change the scene a little bit. Let's imagine it wasn't her home alone. Let's imagine it was he home alone. And instead of 2 cockroaches, it was 2 German shepherds, right? 2 German shepherds right there. Let's see. Would he be up on the chair? He'd be out the fire escape, down the block, because German shepherds are scary. But you see, that's because in his experience, bugs are not scary, dogs are. But when you judge your spouse based on your experience, you're being unfair, unkind, and you're never going to be able to be successfully married. Because your spouse doesn't share your experiences, doesn't share your reality, and therefore you're going to be incredibly difficult to be happily married. When my experience defines reality, you know what happens? You see, you could be the nicest guy in the world. You could be reasonable. You could be kind. You could be tolerant. But there's a limit. What she's doing is irrational. It makes no sense. She's so emotional. She's so flighty. What's with that dame? And as long as you remain locked into your world, where your experience defines reality, it will be very, very difficult for you, as tolerant as you may be, as nice a guy you may be, but what she's doing is absolutely insane, irrational, and there's no way I'm going to tolerate this for any length of time. And so, gentlemen, if you would like to be successfully married, I would like to share with you a very, very important message. What are the 2 most important words in your marriage? And that's a good question. What are the 2 most important words in your marriage? Now, usually I let people guess, and they have some interesting guesses. Yes, dear. Please. Thank you. I was wrong. I'm sorry. What do you think? By the way, I was wrong are the hardest words to say. I don't think they're the most important. They're very important. They're the hardest words to say. I wasn't right. I mean, I know I was wrong. She knows I was wrong. I know she knows it, but I can't say the words. Why? Ooh. And that is a great growth process. Saying the words I was wrong are very eye-opening, very powerful Musar lessons to say. It'll change, it'll help you grow, and they're very important words, but they are not the 2 most important words in your marriage. I firmly believe that the 2 most important words in your marriage are the words, that's strange. That's strange. That's strange. And let me explain to you what I mean. Almost every scientific discovery was preceded by an expression. People assume the expression is, Eureka, I've discovered it. It's not true. Almost every scientific discovery was preceded by an expression, but that expression was, that's strange. You see, a guy mixed chemical X and chemical Y and expected Z, but instead got A. That's strange. And suddenly he discovered a new form of rubber. That's how penicillin was discovered. That's how 3M Post-it notes was. Most scientific discoveries were preceded by a man digging into an area of study and discovering something that made no sense. He said the words, that's strange, and began studying it more carefully. And you see, when you say the words, that's strange, you open yourself up to the scientific curiosity to actually understand your spouse. You see, when you say the words, that's strange, you stop yourself and you say, wait a minute, I would never have reacted that way. I never felt that way. Why in the world would my wife feel that way? She's normally grounded. She's normally sober. She's normally sane. Why is she getting so carried away? And when you say the words, that's strange, you open yourself up to possibly actually understanding your spouse. But gentlemen, let me caution you. You say the words to yourself. Don't say it to your spouse. You say it to yourself. You say to yourself, that's strange. And I tell it to men, I tell it to women. And when I tell it to women, I say, madam, I want to ask you a question. Is he normally kind? Yes. Is he normally considerate? Yes. Is he normally a good guy? So why would he act so cruel, cold, callous? She said, that's exactly what I'm asking. Why? So I explained to her, that's exactly the point. When you have a good guy and he acts so out of character, instead of demonizing, instead of blasting him, take a step back, say that's strange. Why would he get so upset? Why would he act so cruel or callous? And gentlemen, these words, saying the words that's strange, are the key words. Because your wife is going to do something that's inexplicable. She's going to get upset, or she's going to say something, or she's going to forget something, and you're going to say to yourself, there's no excuse, and there's no reason. It's irrational, illogical, irrational. It makes zero sense. And if you step back and say that's strange to yourself, you open yourself up to understand her inner world. Gentlemen, love is the glue to marriage. And one of the tools of love we discussed this evening is infatuation. Infatuation has a shelf life. It expires after 6 months, a year, and that's when it's time to work on the real bond. The real bond, there are many parts to it, many parts to bonds, tools that bond. You have to use all of them. A husband's role is to romance his wife when she understands that he cherishes her. When she has that firm understanding in her mind, life is beautiful, life as well. In the thick and thin of life, you have to remain best friends who love each other. And we have 4 rules of friendship. You reviewed last week's session. Go over it. But ultimately, there are 3 pillars to a successful marriage: commitment, love, and learning to live together. And this evening's discussion about being mind blind is one of the keys to learning to live together. Because I could be the nicest guy in the world, and I've seen this all the time. He's very nice, she's very nice, and they're fighting cats and dogs. But it makes no sense. They want the same things in life, and they really have a good, solid affection for each other. Why can't they just get along? And unless you're able to step out of your blinders, unless you're able to step out of your experience, unless you're able to say the words, wait a minute, why would she feel that way? I don't feel that way. And unless you're able to then say, maybe because she's different than I, that's the first moment that you could have a successful marriage. You see, gentlemen, I don't have to tell you, people are different. People are vastly different. But men and women are more different than anything you can imagine. And that's what Rashi tells us. Vizocha, she's an Ezer, a helpmate, it'll be beautiful, it'll be wonderful, it'll be a beautiful marriage. But the problem is she's equal partners. You're equal partners with different temperaments and different dispositions. You're equal partners with opposite nature. And the only way that you're going to be successfully married is you're able to stop and learn her world. Learn what matters to her. Learn what she really cares about. Learn what offends her. Learn what pleases her. And the only way you're going to do it is if you use scientific curiosity. You have to become a student of your spouse. And all too often we jump to reaction. All too often we know exactly what she's doing. There she goes again. There he goes again. And we demonize, and before you know it, we become blind, mind blind, understanding that my experience is the way I experience things, but that doesn't define reality, is the key to opening yourself up to recognizing the inner world of your spouse and eventually creating a beautiful marriage.